Go the Distance Epilogue. A few months later. She was getting used to this god business. There was a learning curve, to be sure, but each time Meg heard a mortal call out for help, her purpose became clearer. Hera had named her the god of vulnerability, and it suited her, even if she bristled at the title at first. As Wonder Boy kept telling her, she had a knack for hearing a mortal in need, more so than others. When doubt raised its ugly head, or a mortal acted too proudly, she stepped in and tried to steer them in the right direction. And holy Hera, was the feeling rewarding when the mortal actually listened and accepted her aid. Even old Zeus, who was less than thrilled to see Meg back on his turf, had to admit she was good at her job. She seemed to make Hercules deliriously happy, and the feeling was mutual. All the gods were talking about a Mount Olympus wedding, but she and Hercules were taking their time. She still had some unfinished business she wanted to take care of before she thought about the next part of her own story, and that business took her back to Earth. Meg appeared there suddenly one afternoon while Katerina was working on the garden. Cassia took safely in the basket at her side. "Hello, Katerina," Meg said. "Megara!" Katerina stood up quickly in surprise, dropping her towel. Cassia screamed with delight at the sight of her, or maybe it was just the fact that she was glowing. Aegeus came running. "Megara!" he said, looking on in surprise. "To what do we owe this honor?" "Aegeus, you can forget the formalities. I may be a god, but I'm still me," she said, sitting down on their garden bench and picking up the baby, whom she'd bounced on her knee. The child had gotten bigger and heavier since she'd last seen her. "I'm here with some news for Katerina." "News?" Katerina said, confused. "Yes." Meg smiled and put Cassia back down on the basket. "I know the guilt you have about leaving Layla still torments you, especially in the evening when the moon is high." "It's true," Katerina said, her face crumbling. Aegeus quickly put an arm around her. "I am so grateful for all you have done for me and your family, and I can't imagine not being here to see Cassia's every breath, but leaving Layla is still one of the great regrets in my life. I worry for her." "I know," Meg said. "Which is why I wanted you to know that I was true to my word when we left the underworld. I promised you that Layla would be okay, and she really is. As a matter of fact, why don't I let you see for yourself?" Meg walked over to a small pond in their garden, and Katerina and Aegeus quickly followed. Meg flicked her wrist, and the water in the dark green pond began to swirl. Suddenly an image, much like their own reflection, shone back at them. It was Layla, and she was waving to them. "Layla!" Katerina cried out, and let out a sob on Aegeus' shoulder. "That is my sister," she explained. Layla held up a basket of poppies to show them, then waved to someone out of sight who stepped into frame. Meg's heart felt like it might burst at the sight of the two of them together. "Who is that with her?" Aegeus asked about the woman with the long red hair. "That's my mother Thea," Meg said softly, and the pair looked at her. "Layla and I spoke of my mother in the underworld, and when she gave you her blessing to leave, she asked where she could find someone who, too, was looking for love and nourishment in the underworld. I gave her my mother's location, and have since gotten word that the two are inseparable." She looked at Katerina. "Layla has found the surrogate mother she needed to thrive, and my mother finally has the chance to be the parent she never could be on Earth. Persephone checks in on them both, in fact, now that she's returned to Hades, and I'm told they're both quite happy. I thought you'd wanted to know." "Yes," Katerina said, smiling through her tears. "Thank you, God of vulnerability. Thank you for this gift." They heard a squeal and turned around. Cassia had wriggled out of the basket and was crawling toward them. Katerina scooped the child up to face her to the fountain so that Layla and Thea could see her. The image of them looking at one another was one Meg knew she'd never forget. She heard the tinkling of bells, and Hermes popped up beside her. "Come along now, Megara. Hercules and Hera are waiting. Meeting starts in 10, he said, fluttering alongside her. Meg turned toward the family she had helped put back together and smiled. "I must go, but know that I'm always a prayer away if you need me." The image of the pond disappeared as Meg began to fade away. The next thing she knew was Wonder Boy was waiting with outstretched hands. "Well, did it go okay?" he asked. Meg stepped into his arms and kissed him. It was absolutely perfect.